Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our session titled Let's Talk Study with the US Applied Master's Program in the US. My name is Umara Daud, and I am an education advisor working at Islamabad office, Pakistan. A very warm welcome to our speaker, Mr. Tom Powers, who is director, who is the director for Center for Development Economics, CDE, at Williams College. Mr. Power has worked as an administrative director of the Williams College Center of Development Economics since 1999, managing the CDE program's finance, admissions, and operations. Before that, he was a banker for emerging markets, countries, and companies based in New York and London at different points. His earlier banking experience was in US municipal finance, mainly infrastructure funding. Mr. Powers also worked as a school administrator in Sierra Leone during the early 1980s. He did his BA from Williams College and has an MBA degree from Howard University. Before starting the session, a bit about who we are. Let me share my screen with you. In Pakistan, we are EducationUSA is a global network of under the US State Department of comprising over 425 international student advising centers in more than 175 countries. We are your official source of US higher education. We provide accurate, comprehensive, and current information about the opportunities to study at accredited post-secondary institutions in the United States. We are available to students that need support and advice throughout Pakistan through email, call, and in-person meetings. Please visit our website, www.educationusa.pk, to register for our free advising services. In Pakistan, EducationUSA is hosted at United States Education Foundation, USEFP, which is also the Fulbright Commission in the country. USEFP promotes mutual understanding between the people of Pakistan and the people of United States through educational and cultural exchange with offices in Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi. USEFP comprises several departments, including advising, testing, programs, and alumni. If you want more information about our services, please visit our website, www.usefp.org. Before we start the session, please remember to drop your questions in the Q&A box. Tom will answer these questions at the end of the presentation. I will now request our speaker, Mr. Tom Powers, to start the session.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much, Umara. And thank you to USEFP for giving me this opportunity. It's nice to be online with a bunch of people. It's early morning here, but as you can see from the window behind me, it is light, so I have no excuses for not being fully awake. I'll try to go through a few things quickly, both about the US system generally, and then about our specific program, and try to leave ample time for questions. The opening slide I have just shows two buildings at Williams College out of about 100, but those two buildings are the home for the master's degree in policy economics. Next slide, please. Yes, the US higher education system can be confusing. I took some figures from various sources to demonstrate how confusing. I think for your purposes, since I believe that the bulk of the audience is interested in master's degrees or PhDs, you should focus on the fact that there are about 1,200 institutions that give master's degrees and only about 300 that grant PhDs. At the same time, there are about 6,000 schools called colleges or universities. There are those that give non-degrees, that give certificates for various subjects. Then there are a lot of almost 1,000 two-year institutions. Then there are many four-year institutions as well. Let's go back to the slide that says a variety of degrees. Yes. I'm going to speak briefly about three different kinds of degrees that may take you to approximately the same place, depending on, of course, that depends on where you want to, exactly what you want to study and where you want to work afterwards. There are degrees that are standalone master's degrees in economics. There are also master's degrees, MA or sometimes MS in finance, and then there are MBA degrees. Master's degrees in economics in many schools are not awarded, or they are awarded only as a part of the PhD program, meaning you don't apply directly to the master's program. It's a very different system than the UK, where often you go through the master's degree and then you continue on to a PhD. For many top US economics degrees, you apply directly to the PhD program. But many schools also have standalone master's degrees. And to differentiate the standalone master's degrees, they are often less theoretical and considered terminal degrees or standalone degrees. And those tend to be in applied economics. Those are often in different units of the university than the economics department. So, for example, at Harvard, they are through the Kennedy School of Government. At Columbia, they're through the School of International and Public Affairs, and so forth. But there are, as I say, many master's degrees in economics alone. Generally, they tend to be applied to some subfields, such as environmental economics, development economics, rather than being as theoretical and as quantitative as the first portion of a PhD. There also are master, and the jobs a person tends to get after a standalone master's in economics are not research jobs and often not teaching jobs, but they are practitioner jobs where you work using the tools of economics to analyze different problems. Master's degrees in finance are more recent in the last 20 years. Those are often a 1 year or 1+ year degree. And those are because the reason that most people get master's degrees in finance or an MBA, because those are specifically directed toward higher paying business jobs. They tend to be debt financed and often fewer scholarships given. MBA programs have been around for a long time, for 5 decades in many cases. And there are rankings of the programs, and rankings tend to emphasize big names, reputations, extensive alumni networks, and those, at least initially, may determine somewhat of something about where you're able to interview for positions. We can come back to this later during questions. I can give you some names of programs that are standalone master's degrees in finance, and MBAs with concentrations in finance. Next slide, please. What should you be looking for? You should be thinking deeply about what you want to do afterwards, and consequently looking for an appropriate degree. So look at the curriculum specifically, look at who teaches that, get some advice. I think it's a great service that the US EFP will give you knowledgeable and free advice just based on your willingness and effort in making appointments. Of course, funding is also important. It's nice to have scholarship funding. Scholarship funding tends to be contained within the top programs in a particular field, and it tends to be allocated toward people who are the strongest applicants. The US system is unusual in that there are many of the big name schools that you have heard about, probably Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, those are all private institutions, and they have large endowments that help provide a good amount of the funding. There are also very high quality state-funded institutions, especially in some of the larger states, California, which has UCal Berkeley and UCLA among their great schools, University of Texas, University of Michigan. Those get a great deal of funding from state legislatures. So their endowments may not be as large, but they have great ability to have strong programs. So you have to look at both the quality of the program, think about where you want to end up, and look at the prospects for scholarship funding or financial aid. Next slide, please. Yes, scholarships for international students. Those tend to be controlled at the master's level by the schools themselves. At the master's and the PhD level, often people are funded for PhDs by the opportunity to teach undergraduates and to do research for senior professors. There are scholarships that are funded through the US government. As Umara talked about, the Fulbright program has, I believe, more than 180 Fulbright scholars from Pakistan this year. So that's a very large source. Overall, I looked and there were something like 3,600 Pakistanis studying in the US a year ago at the master's and PhD level. If you see online offers for scholarships that are more or less scholarship brokers charging you a fee or asking a fee and saying that they will help you find a scholarship, be careful. No institution will charge you. They may charge you an application fee, but they won't charge you a fee to find your scholarship. Standardized tests. Standardized tests help a university understand the strength of various applicants. If you're looking at US economics programs at the PhD level and to a lesser extent at the master's level, the competition is worldwide. So the schools are evaluating candidates from as many as 60 or 70 countries. They don't always know that much about your university and the quality of grades there. So standardized tests are a secondary source of information. If your grades are very strong in your respective pool and your standardized tests look strong compared to a global pool, of course, that positions you well for funding, admission and funding. Next, please. Oh, I think that was, well, I think the next slide is about Williams College. So I'll talk briefly about Williams College, I think very briefly, but I want to give you a chance to ask any questions later about the general idea of US master's degrees and PhDs. Williams College, I think the term college can be confusing. It means a different thing in the US than it does in many countries. I believe in Pakistan, it can mean something other than an institution that mainly gives bachelor's degrees, but that's what it means in the US. So Williams College has about 2,000 students, but only about 50 are getting master's degrees, 2,000 are getting bachelor's degrees. Even at well-known places like Harvard, the undergraduate sector is called Harvard College. Williams is in a small town in Western Massachusetts. So if you, depending on the scale of map you look at, if you look at a globe, it looks conveniently located near both New York and Boston, but in reality, we're several hours, more than 2 hours away from both of them. It is a small town, largely dominated by the college, but fortunately, it's a small college that has been around some time and has the benefit of having built up resources over a number of years and being able to attract some good professors. Next, please. Here are just some photos. One from the library. We're in a small town with 8,000 people, but the library has well over 1 million books. We have a number of old buildings that look like what one might think a college should look like. Generally, they're remodeled inside, so they function in the modern era with classroom technology. The photos on the right, the 2 students riding bicycles, and then the classroom photo, those are both from the master's program in economics, in policy economics, and I'll give you a little more information about that. Next photo, please, or next slide. Rankings. There are a lot of rankings of US colleges and universities. These are 2 just selected to give you an idea that Williams is a good school. But honestly, be careful about any rankings. US News and World Report has been doing rankings for about 40 years. They rank large universities, and then they rank small liberal arts colleges. Among liberal arts colleges, Williams has done well. Forbes ranks colleges and universities together. But be careful, these are rankings only of the undergraduate program. So these are more dependent on general reputation. When you are looking at specific programs, you should look for rankings of those programs. But again, be careful about your source, because there are websites that are .com and essentially are promoting rankings from their large advertisers. So be careful about your source of rankings. These are US News and World Report and Forbes are reputable magazines. However, Forbes has varied their methodology from year to year. There's no, but if you see the detail, it says Harvard was 15th in the most recent rankings. I think there's nobody who would believe that Harvard's the 15th most selective place for US undergraduates. The Forbes methodology just changed in recent years. Harvard had been number 1 from 2017 through 2019. Next, please. Here are 2 photos of the Williams master's degree program. The old building where the teaching takes place and the new building where most of the participants live. They're not very far apart, but far enough apart that people run quickly during the winter months. Next slide, please. Just a summary of information about the Williams program. It is a 1-year program. We are a small school and cannot offer infinite electives, but we can offer a very good quality program on the development process for public sector economists. So this means most of our participants are from governments, and we have been able to collect some professors who have particularly strong backgrounds, many who had worked for the IMF or World Bank. And because we enroll only for this program, only international students from public sector backgrounds, we are very aware of the need to arrange scholarship funding. And we look at that very carefully in the admissions process. And I'll tell you about the profile of students we're looking for and give you some idea about the admissions process in just a moment. Next slide, please. Okay, we've had graduates from many countries, including some who've risen to very senior levels. Perhaps we can move on from this one, and I can talk more specifically about some graduates who've been in senior policy positions from Pakistan. Well, I think here's an impressive list. This is over, our program started in 1960. A former governor of the State Bank of Pakistan, Ishrat Hussain, studied in our program. A former chair of the Higher Education Commission, Tariq Banouri, studied in our program. Both later went on to get PhDs. And a gentleman who recently stepped down as cabinet secretary of the government also studied here. The Williams undergraduate program has a current star, Lena Khan, who is chair of the U.S. Federal Trade Commission, was an undergraduate here only a little more than 10 years ago. So she is not only very smart, but very young, and in an important role trying to untangle complexities of some of the high-tech firms and their infringement on perhaps free trade. Next, please. The academic curriculum for the master's program in economics, in policy economics. As I say, it's an applied program, so the idea is not to prepare a person for a PhD program, but to give them skills that can be used in a variety of work environments afterwards. The most common work environments for our graduates are finance ministries in countries around the world, central banks, planning or economy ministries, if those exist, and in some cases, NGOs. Everybody does, because the average age of our students is a little over 30, there's some review to start with. Then people do 4 required courses looking at economies in emerging markets and developing nations. Then in January, one shifts to take an elective course and to start writing brief policy papers in which you apply what you've learned to situations in your own country. Then one does more of that in the second semester. So one should think of this as a first semester that is required courses and test intensive, and a second semester that is elective courses and lets you specialize in the field, the subfield that you work on. And that could be something like bank regulation. It could be something like tax policy. It could be environmental policies that may serve a country. It could be development of the educational sector or the health sector in the country. It could be a variety of things. Next slide, please. What are we looking for in this specific program? We, as I say, tend to take people who have worked. The average age is approximately 30. Most have been in governments and in economics designed to come to a public sector solution, trying to improve the plight of the average person, as opposed to trying to be profit maximizers. So we get a great large number of applications. We evaluate their academic backgrounds, and then we try to assess the ability to, for our program to add value to the career of a person after they continue their work and generally in their own government. So most of the people who study in our program are on official leave, official study leave from their governments. Next, please. Just to give you a timeline, we have several months ago finished admissions for the people who will enroll in August 2023. We started this year with about 360 applications. We, because of the difficulty of taking the GRE in many of the countries we draw from, we administer our own test in some places. Then we also, because many people are not primarily English speakers, we have administered an English test as well. We collect information and share that with our professors. We went from closer to 400 to an admit list of just over 30. And then we have worked since then to arrange funding, both from our own resources, from some third-party resources, some international scholarship programs. But I'm happy to say that as of early May, as of May 2nd, we have a set of 30 people for whom funding has been arranged and who are just starting on the visa process. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are for some statistics from the last year. We had, as I say, almost 400 applications. We sifted through those and had some Some tough decisions to make, but admitted fewer than 10%, so only 32 in total. And then we enrolled 26 people who are currently here and finishing up in a month. Among those who didn't enroll, one was admitted to a PhD program, went straight to that. 3 plan to attend this following year for different reasons, either visa delays because of COVID or requests from their employers that they defer for a year. And then 2 were promoted and decided they didn't need a master's degree after all. In a sense, our advantage is that we feel fairly confident about our funding, so we can tell our applicants that they should worry about admission and we'll worry about funding. Honestly, that's not true of every master's degree program. Many master's degree programs are taking are looking at candidates from all over the world and as well as the US, and they can select from a variety of self-funded or people who may need some financial aid. Next slide, please. These are the current people in our, actually, this is last year's class in our program. I guess the current people, I didn't include their slide in case anybody wanted to write them for advice. They're too busy writing their final papers and taking their final exams. But all of these people who were in the program a year ago did actually get the degree and are back with their employers and successfully resuming work, hopefully with additional responsibility. Next, please. As I said earlier, we're in a small town. The nightlife is not outstanding here, though people do manage to have their own parties, but there's a lot to do outside when the weather's mild. You see that we're in some small hills and people do a lot of sports and have a lot of different interests. Next, please. We do realize that most of the people who do come from abroad to study in the US are from large cities, and it can be a little hard to adjust to a small town. So we do have several trips during the year in our program and justify several of those trips with a number of meetings at policymaking institutions. And those are always a welcome break from the academic schedule and from life in a small town. Next. Well, here, just a brief summary. Our degree is applied and brief and covers the development process for people who want to work in the public sector. So not everything. We do have good access to professors who have vast experience before teaching here. We are in a fortunate position that people have to worry mainly about admission rather than funding. And that's pretty much it. I think I don't want to go on any longer. I want to give you the chance to ask any questions. So thanks for bearing with me, and I hope that didn't take too long.
Thank you, Tom, for a very insightful presentation and giving us an introduction to William and his programs. For our audience who joined a bit late, just a heads up, please drop your questions in Q&A box and Tom will be able to answer them. The first question, Tom, that I can ask is, what are a few factors that can improve a student's chances of getting into a fully funded program or graduate program?
Well, it will depend a little on the field, but clearly the biggest 2 factors are your university grades and your corresponding board scores. So if your grades show that you're among the top students at your university and the admissions committee at the school to which you're applying doesn't know your university, then you demonstrate the strength of your program and of your own abilities by having standardized test scores that correspond to that. A lot of people say that you can't improve your standardized test scores greatly through preparation. I don't agree with that. I think if you are from, say you're from the US and you've grown up taking those tests, you may be very familiar with them. In that case, you may not change your score much by intensive preparation, but if you're from a different educational environment and you haven't done many of those before, familiarity with the test can make a great difference. So I would say, and you can do this inexpensively online, you just have to be tough on yourself and prepare hard and honestly.
The next question is, does William offer masters only in economics, or there are other programs?
As unfortunately, we're a very small school. We have only 2 master's degrees programs. One is in economics, and the other one is in the history of art. And it really prepares people to be museum curators. So these are quirks for departments in a small college in a small town. We had in the late 1950s many economists who were going to other countries as countries were gaining independence and working on teams there, and they thought they could offer a good program here. And the location where we are in Massachusetts is considered a bit of a cultural vacation area. So for being in a small area, there are a lot of museums. So only those 2. Sorry.
Another question is, do students get placement while they are enrolled in the program, especially the applied master's program?
In our master's program, no. We take people who are on leave from jobs and who pledge to return to jobs generally. In other applied master's programs, I think there are placement services. Honestly, the placement capabilities of every US school are going to be far better among US employers than they will be internationally. So just to list some schools that I believe have good master's programs in applied economics at the standalone master's level: Texas A&M, University of Florida, North Carolina State, University of Maryland. These are all state schools. They do have large enough graduate divisions that their master's programs are applied, but they may have some flexibility. Then there are some specialized programs, for example, at Yale, at Harvard, and at Columbia. And both at Yale and through the Kennedy School at Harvard, those tend to be specialized in development-related fields.
It's a general question. Is internship part of a curriculum? Is it a requirement in applied master's programs generally?
I think generally it's not. It may be in some cases. In our program, it is not. U.S. higher education is generally not for profit, but it doesn't mean that schools are not trying to, in a sense, maximize their tuitions. So in many cases, you may want to look for a program that offers internships, but for example, I know that there is a program at through the Columbia School of International and Public Affairs program in economic policy management that in the past had required an internship, but I think they have loosened that and it's an optional thing rather than a requirement now.
So I think you addressed this question in the presentation, but do one needs working experience before applying to applied degree? If yes, how much of working experience one needs?
That will vary I think to the larger, more general applied economics degrees, standalone masters at some of the state universities. I believe you do not need work experience in advance. More important, you need to know what you want to use that degree for, I believe, so you can specialize in a viable field. In our particular very small program, we do expect and require work experience in advance.
One more question is, as you said in your presentation that this is a standalone master's degree, but can this degree translate into a PhD, like a professional PhD, like DBA or MBA? After MBA, can somebody go for DBA? And also, do they require students to have experience after their master's degree to be able to qualify for their doctoral program?
Well, let me take on the more general question first. I believe often DBA programs are bundled at the same institution where the MBA programs are, and it is not unusual to take a core of MBA program courses and then to continue on to a DBA. I'll be honest, that knowledge could be somewhat out of date. I did an MBA, but it was a few decades ago. But in my case, I talked seriously after the MBA about, or toward the end of the MBA, about continuing to a DBA. And that was an option. It just wasn't as attractive financially.
Another question is, you talked about funding, and students will find funding once they are selected in Williams. Is the master's funding like the other regular master's funding? Like, would they be offered assistantships, graduate assistantships, TA-ships, or research assistantships, or it be just scholarship?
In our specific case, our program is so brief, it's only 10 months. We offer scholarships or grants. We don't want people to be, we want them to maximize their time here and to get the most they can out of the program. So we don't ask them to do other things. And that will vary by school. I think a more common thing for teaching assistantships and research assistantships, those tend to be more common in PhD programs.
Okay, so one more question is maintaining a GPA a requirement? Is a certain GPA required throughout the program for being able to be part of the program till the end?
In most schools, that's true. In our program, it's only 2 semesters. So if we have had very few cases in which a person was not keeping up. Perhaps it's for several reasons. Aside, I could say it's because our professors are so good, but I'm not sure that that's telling the complete story. I think it's because people are on leave, normally on leave from their employers. There is a high cost of going home without the degree if you've been given leave. So I think that motivation level is high. And we tend to take people who are fairly secure in what their future goals are, and consequently, it's easier for them to find some motivation.
One more question that people are asking, and they're asking about other like programs.
Sure.
Are these programs also funded by industry, like Microsoft and all that, especially in the IT field?
I have to be honest, I don't know a lot about the IT field. There may be some that have, for which there are specific scholarships by the leading private sector employers, but my guess is that there's such a strong demand for these degrees that the employers can take a bit of a relaxed position and wait to see who gets through and then hire the people they want. I don't mean to be that cynical on it, but the master's degrees in the US, I know more about the finance field, and the financial sector tends to not, unless a person is already employed there, tends to not pay for the degrees. They just wait until a person has gone through that screen, and then they let the hiring process make their interests known.
So this is an interesting question. Somebody is asking if they get rejected from the program once. One, can they reach out to the admission office and ask for the reasons of rejection? And second, can they apply again to the program?
Well, I can only answer that for our program. If you've been rejected once, you can certainly apply again, because it may be a simple question of you are a great student, you've got an impressive start to your career, but you haven't worked very long, and we feel that you would benefit from a little more work. So sure, it's fine to apply again, and some of our best students have been in exactly that situation, just as you may apply for a full ride scholarship more than once. I assume that that's the case. But will we give you specific reasons? It's usually not a matter, there may be, but usually it's not a matter of something being wrong with a person's application. It's just a matter of, we only have 30 places and we have close to 400 applicants. So there may be people who look well positioned to take advantage of the degree at that time. So I think that it's also, admissions officers are reluctant to make promises. If I don't think anybody would say, oh, if you just had a higher score in this area, we would admit you. I'm not sure that any individual can make promises into the future. In our case, I don't decide. I've worked here 24 years, but I don't decide who's admitted. I'm part of the conversation among a dozen people that decide who's admitted. So we discuss and work for some consensus.
The people are a bit concerned about 10 months funding. Like there's in the regular master program, sometimes you get 9 months funding, and sometimes you say the letter says 12 months funding. So at Williams, 10-month funding, what would that entail?
Well, we run a financial aid process, so each case is not exactly the same. We ask a person to submit information about their own personal financial situation and whether there may be any support from their employer or government. And then we try to tailor funding based on that. I will say the goal of our program is for a person not to go into debt to study here. If you go into debt, then the chances are that you will need to look for a different job to repay that debt rather than stay in the public service, in the public sector. So that would completely defeat the purpose of what we're trying to do. So that's sort of the bottom line, but it's not uniform what every person is given in terms of financial aid.
I think maybe this might be one of the last questions. Is applied master's program in the US always 1 year, or it can also go to 2 years or a different duration?
There are programs that can be 1.5 years or 2 years and have a longer credit, have a larger credit requirement. And in many cases that may depend on the size and breadth of the institution. I believe that a big state school like the University of Texas is probably able to offer a lot more high quality economics courses than a small place like Williams. So there may be alternatives, and yes, I think Texas A&M, UCLA, Michigan, I think those may give you more course diversity than we could give you.
So this is an interesting question. Somebody is asking whether applying to applied master's program is more competitive than simply master's program. Like, does it require it's higher competition?
Well, maybe I should step back. I think that most master's programs in economics are applied economics. Maybe I wasn't clear about that. I think the level of competition for master's programs in economics is lower than the level of competition for PhD programs in economics. If you look at PhDs in economics from the US, it is completely a global competition. I don't know what percentage, but a very high percentage of those degrees are of places in PhD programs in economics are given to outstanding students from all over the world. So that is truly a global competition, more, I think, than a master's degree program in applied economics. Because applied tend to fit a little more a very highly developed job market, and those tend to lead to jobs often in the public sector in the countries where the programs are located.
So this last question, and this is related to the question that I just asked, is funding for applied master's program more easily available than the funding for master's program, a regular master program?
Well, again, I think applied master's programs are what is offered in economics generally. The people who study theory and in a very quantitative way, those are the people in PhD programs. So I think the funding varies dramatically based on the individual school. State schools offer less, this is a great generalization, but may offer lower amounts in scholarship funding than some of the private institutions with large endowments, but their sticker price of tuition may be far more reasonable.
Thank you so much, Tom Powers, for joining us today for a very, very in-depth presentation about applied master's program generally and an introduction to Williams Applied Master's Program in Economics. Thank you to our audience for joining us. We apologize for any inconvenience that happened in the start. Please do visit our website, our Facebook page, and Instagram and Twitter, and follow us for updated information and events. If you have more questions, please reach out to your EducationUSA advisor, and they'll be able to answer those questions for you. Thank you so much, Tom. Thank you so much, everybody, and take care. I hope you have a great day.